Welcome back to 1776 for week 2. Welcome to all those who are joining us online. Just for those who are joining online, you should applaud the students who are here, alumni who are here. It's like 12 degrees outside. Actually, I think it's negative with the wind chill. So thanks for being here. Please scan the QR code. That way we know you're here. Now, I'm told there are some of you who only have flip phones. Is this true? Who only has a flip phone? Is this not true? Anyone only have a flip phone? I was going to have you stand up and say that this is the most eligible person to get married in the entire room. Like, I'm a huge fan of flip phones. Okay, so scan this. This lets us know in an efficient way that you're here. Okay, we're going to try to do a lot today, so I want to just get right into it. And yesterday was Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We had the day off, and it's only appropriate that we recognize the great Dr. King. And he speaks in his most famous speech about the Declaration of Independence. So I'm going to show you a clip. It's about 4 or 5 minutes. For those watching, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it if you're watching online, but you can listen, and really listening to the words is the most important thing. I want you to focus on, I'm going to ask you, after we watch this clip, what's Dr. King's attitude, or what does he think of the Declaration of Independence? We're not going to watch the whole speech, just the beginning, okay? So what's his attitude, or what does he think about the Declaration of Independence?
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation.
So what does Dr. King think of the Declaration of Independence? Yeah.
He sees it as a promise to not just white people, but to black men as well.
He sees it, tell me your name again? Michael says he sees it as a promise to all men, black and white. Other thoughts? What's the image he uses? The Declaration is what? A promissory note. What's a promissory note? This is before Venmo. What's a promissory note? It's a check. Okay? It's a check. When you write a check, I don't know. When's the last time? Who in here has written a check in the last year? Oh, okay. You still write checks. All right, that's good. So when you write a check, you are paying funds, right? But it's a promise. It's saying you can take money with this check. I'm giving it to you, which allows you to withdraw money from my funds, right? So if the Declaration is a promissory note, it's actually a little bit different than a check. What's a promissory note? It's not a check. It's a promise in the future. It's like a check for the future.
Promise to pay.
A promise to pay. And he says, black Americans have gone to cash the check, and what's happened? It's bounced. Insufficient funds. But is the Declaration itself bankrupt? What's his attitude towards the Declaration? Maybe not his attitude towards all of America, but his attitude towards the Declaration. Anyone?
I think that he's saying it's a promise for democracy.
It's a promise for democracy, okay. But is he angry? How would you describe him or his attitude towards the Declaration? Yeah.
It felt to me like more of his ire was directed not at the Declaration itself, but that the government had not put into practice the promises of the Declaration.
His ire is not, tell me your name, sorry. Cole says his ire is not directed towards the Declaration, but to the promises or unfulfilled promises of the nation. Okay? And his attitudes towards the Declaration is
like reverent almost.
Reverent or hopeful, right? Like imagine your parents wrote a check for you to be here at Notre Dame, and it bounced. And so Notre Dame goes to your parents saying, hey, the check bounced. You only go to the parents if you think what? That they can pay, right? If you know the parents can't pay or the parents are defrauding the university, what are you going to do? Lillian says, go to the police. I mean, you're going to, sorry, this is a bad example. I didn't think this through. You're going to kick the student out, aren't you? So all you parents watching, make sure those checks are good, right? But he's not saying this check is worthless, right? And tossing it away. Everyone see that? He's saying, look, I tried to cash the check. We black Americans tried to cash this check. And it came back insufficient funds. And what are we doing again? What's he doing again? He's saying, what's his action?
He's going to try and cash the check.
We're going to try it again. And you only try it again if what? You believe that the person who wrote the check, or in this case, the country that wrote the check, what? Is good for it. You see the image of hope or the attitude of hope? Yeah? Critical for sure of America, right? You wrote a bad check. But the promise is still in the Declaration, right? Okay, a quick side note. When I was thinking about this speech, I mentioned yesterday undergraduate thesis. I don't know why undergraduate theses are on my mind. A terrific undergraduate thesis would be to take a number of black Americans throughout American history and write a thesis comparing their attitudes, understandings of the Declaration of Independence. Right? We're going to have 3 in this class. We did the 1619 project last week. We have Martin Luther King this week. We're going to have Frederick Douglass in a few weeks. Throw in a couple more people. Throw in Malcolm X. Throw in Clarence Thomas, and that's a wonderful undergraduate thesis. Okay, so any of you looking for a thesis topic? Okay. It would be worth comparing King and the 1619 project. Are they consistent? Do they have different understandings? Okay. All right. Sorry, these are quotes we don't need. Okay, this is what we're going to do tonight, hopefully. This takes me 3 weeks to do in my classes, and I'm going to try to do it now in 47 minutes. So we'll go a little bit fast, and we'll just hit the highlights, okay? We're going to try to explain the political philosophy of the American founding. It's a big topic, so I'd say this is what AI would give you, but it's not clear to me AI would get it right. So that's why you're here, I suppose. Okay. What did we do last week? Well, I said the purpose of the Declaration, and don't worry about writing these things down. You can find these slides, and for those of you who are watching online, we have the 1776 webpage on the Con Studies website. You can find all these slides right there, so you don't have to worry writing down. In fact, those of you with laptops open, you should just close them, okay? Because what we're doing here will be far more interesting than anything else you might be doing. Or if it's not, you can do it in 45 minutes. Okay, so last week, what did we do? We said, what was the purpose of the Declaration? We said last week. Anyone? Yep.
Declare independence.
To declare independence and to what?
Justify breaking away from the British Empire.
Yeah, to make an argument that not only are we in an independent people or peoples, independent states, we have a right to be so. That is, the founders make an argument about justice. And remember we had 2 syllogisms. And the second one was there's a right to revolution. When is the right? The first one is what? When can a people invoke the right to revolution? Anyone remember? Yeah.
When a government abdicates its duty to protect the rights of its citizens.
When a government abdicates its duty or fails to perform its duty to protect the rights. The argument of the Declaration is the purpose of government is to protect rights. Okay, everyone with me? Okay, why is that? Okay, that's the first thing we're going to try to explain. Why is the purpose of government to protect rights and not something else? And the founders begin with human nature. And so I gave you a reading by James Wilson. James Wilson is not that well known, but he's extraordinarily important. He's from Philadelphia. He was very influential in the ratification debates about the Constitution in Philadelphia. He's one of, I think, 6 individuals to sign both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. I know he signed both. I just can't remember how many individuals. I think it's 6. Okay. And he wrote a book. It's actually a series of lectures, which he gave over several years, I think 3 years, starting in 1790. In fact, President Washington was at the first lectures. And they're called his Lectures on Law. And I gave you just a few pages from one of the lectures right in the middle of the book. Okay, I gave you these passages here because it gets to the essence of what the founders thought. And so I'm going to read you a few passages, a few sentences, and I want you to think, do you agree? Do you agree with what he says about human nature? And if you do, is his conclusion correct? Okay? So this is, and it's on the screen. Nature has implanted man the desire of his own happiness, for his own happiness. You agree? Yeah? Okay. She is nature here. She has inspired him with many tender affections towards others, especially in the near relations of life, your friends and family. She's endowed him with intellectual and active powers. And these intellectual powers here include what Wilson would say the moral sense, the ability to know right from wrong. Okay, agree? Think for yourself, okay? She, again, nature. She has furnished him with a natural impulse to exercise his powers for his own happiness and the happiness of those for whom he entertains such tender affections. So this is Wilson saying, look what human beings are. Okay, now here's the, and therefore what? Now tell me if you think this follows. He says, if all this be true, the undeniable consequence is that he has a right to exert those powers for the accomplishment of those purposes in such a manner and upon such objects as his inclinations and judgments shall direct, provided he does no injury to others. Do you agree? Do you see what Wilson is doing? He's saying, this is what human beings are. The founders start off with what is man? What are human beings? And what are human beings? They're rational beings who have the capacities to exercise freedom. Last week, did we talk about dogs and how you can own dogs? I can't remember. Did we do that or not? We didn't do that? How many of you own a dog? Oh, a lot. Is it just you own a dog? Yes, no? It's okay to own a dog? I mean, if it's not, then you should go to confession or something. But look, everyone thinks it's okay to own a dog, except if you're a philosophy professor at a fancy Ivy League school, right? We all know that, right? But why? Why can you own any of you own another human person? Why can you own a dog but not another human person?
One's an injustice.
Well, why is it an injustice?
It violates the person's right to liberty.
Okay, but why do they have that right? I mean, that's our question. What is it about people and what is it about dogs that you can own a dog but not a person? Do you see how in answering that question, it forces you to address the question, well, what are human beings? And Wilson's answer to the question is, human beings have certain capacities to think, to act. Now, a dog can think in a certain capacity. A dog can act. To love. I mean, how many of you think your dog loves you? Well, maybe. I don't know. Can a dog love you like another human being can love you? And if your answer is no, then what is it? What's the difference? Because in thinking through that difference, you start to get at what is the essence or essential or unique about human beings. And what James Wilson and the founders thought is human beings can know right from wrong and choose to do right. That is, they can morally view the world, think about it, ponder it, talk about it with their friends, know what's right to do or know what's wrong to do, and they can choose to do what's right or wrong, and they can choose to do what's right even if it's not in their own interest. That ability for moral reflection is the most unique things about human beings, according to this philosophy. And then what follows is, if that's true, it would be an injustice to treat that type of being as if he or she lacked those capacities. Did everyone follow the argument? Thoughts about it? Yes? No? Did it make sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there are people who maybe lack those capacities in some sense, right? Because they're developmentally delayed in some ways. Is it that they have human nature has basically provided them with the potential to have those things, like the way they were created, they're created to have them?
Okay, so what about those who, for some accident at birth, or you get in a car accident or something, you hit your head, you no longer have the normal functionings? What Wilson is doing here, what the founders are doing here, is talking about the nature of human beings as a species. Okay? But think about the example. What would we do to someone who cannot govern themselves because of an accident in birth or whatever? Let's say, they're skiing, they fall down, they hit their head, and they're alive, and they're not in a coma, but they just lack the capacities to, this happens, unfortunately, right? They're an adult, but they have the mental and moral capacities of a 6-year-old. And let's say this person is fabulously wealthy. What do we do in that situation? And they have no relatives, their parents are deceased, it's just them. So they're very wealthy, and they only have the moral capacities of a 6-year-old. What do we do in that situation? Do we turn them over to the development office and say, sorry, that was not appropriate. What do we do in this situation? I mean, this happens. What do you think should happen?
Power of attorney.
Yeah, we set up a power of attorney. We set up a guardian, right? And why do we set up a guardian?
They can't take care of themselves.
Because they can't take care of themselves. And if we allow them to make their own choices, what's going to happen?
They'll endanger themselves.
They'll endanger themselves, or what's going to happen to their money? It's going to be swindled from them, right? They're going to have a dorm named after them or something, right? But do we just take their money and use it for our own purposes? And why don't we do that? Because they're part of the human species. And we treat them as we ought to treat a human being. But you can't, I don't know if this is actually true. You can't leave your dog money, or if you can, the dog doesn't get to choose what to do with it. Right? That would be nonsensical. Okay? I mean, I guess if you wanted to leave your dog the money, you'd set up a trust and someone would execute the trust on behalf of the dog. Right? If you do that, by the way, then you should, the development office should get in touch with you. Okay. Right. So the founders start with the moral capacities of human beings. Now, are these moral capacities limited to one gender or one race? The answer obviously is no. where do these capacities come from? Who gave us these capacities? Yeah, the Creator, right? In the Declaration of Independence, when it says, all men are created equal, they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We are endowed by our Creator with a certain nature. That nature ought to be respected because it was endowed by the Creator. In Christianity, we say we're created in the image of God. Right? It's perfectly consistent with the Declaration of Independence. We are created in a certain way with certain capacities, which according to James Wilson, the founders, means therefore we ought to be treated in a certain way. And what is the way we ought to be treated? As beings capable of governing ourselves. Every human being has a natural dominion over their own lives. And a very easy way to think about this is who in here is married? Any students, undergraduate students married? Okay. Presumably many, if not most of you, are going to get married or want to get married. Who's going to choose your spouse? Many of you are pointing to yourselves. Why should you choose your spouse? Like, why do you get to do that? I mean, I might do a better job. Anyone want to answer that one?
The same kind of natural capacity for reflection and self-governance.
Would any of you marry someone? Reagan, let me ask you. Would you marry someone who said to you, Professor Munoz told me I must marry you, and so I'm asking you to marry me?
Must is a strong word, but you did facilitate.
I did actually say that to Colin, and now they're engaged. But nonetheless, at some point you had to believe Colin wanted to do this, right? Okay. Because none of us would actually want to marry someone who was just saying, my parents told me I have to marry you, right? That's not what a normal human being does, right? That's not just, okay, if you take anything from this particular class, you should take, if someone proposes to you and says, my mother said I have to marry you, you should say no, okay? So that's what it means to be a human being means to be a free human being. Because that's how we're created. Okay, everyone with me here? Okay. If you have your Wilson, you can turn to 636. And this is just Wilson saying the same thing. It's on the bottom of page 636. It says, when we say that all men are equal, we do not mean to apply this equality to their virtues, their talents, their dispositions, their acquirements. Wilson says we're diverse in all sorts of ways. And it's actually good that we're different. Because we're different, we need one another. Right? Some people have talents for this, some people have talents for that. Because men and women are different, they need one another, and most obviously, they need one another to bear children. Right? So it's good that we're different. But how are we the same? In our natural rights and duties, we are the same. Because we are all human beings made the same by the same Creator. That's what the founders meant by equality. Okay? We're equal in our natural liberty. Okay, that's the key meaning of, and by natural liberty, it just means we're equal in each and every one of us in our dominion over our own lives. Okay? Again, let me back up. What's the purpose of all this? In the Declaration of Independence, the founders say the purpose of government is to secure rights. King of England has failed to secure our rights, therefore we have the right to revolution, to overthrow the king, to institute new government. But then that raises a question. Why is the purpose of government to secure rights? That's what we're talking about. In fact, say, well, let's look at, before we talk about government, it's the government of human beings. Well, what are human beings? What are the moral qualities of human beings? Well, human beings are all equal in their capacity or their endowed capacity to govern themselves. Okay, that's where we are in the argument. Okay. All right, let's go forward. Okay. Wilson continues, the right of natural liberty is suggested to us not only by our selfish parts, our desire for self-preservation. If you've read Thomas Hobbes, you can think Hobbes right here. Our selfish parts of our Constitution, but by our generous affections, and especially by our moral sense, which intimates to us that in our voluntary actions consist our dignity and perfection. This is the non-Hobbesian elements. That's what I meant when I said, what's unique about us human beings is our ability to know right from wrong. So when Wilson says our dignity and our perfection is in our voluntary actions, here it's interesting, the founders don't use the term dignity much. We use it all the time, but it's not a word that they use. It's one of the only instances of them using the word dignity. Our dignity, it's not in our willful choice, right? He says, in our moral sense, in our ability to know right from wrong and to choose to do what is right. And if you want to think about that, why are heroes heroes? Like if you said, oh, that's a good question to ask you. Like if I said, give me an example of heroic action, what would you say? Anyone?
Risking yourself to save people from a burning building.
Okay, so the example that immediately comes to my mind is 9/11 and the first responders, right? The firefighters who, even like after the first building fell, and they were still going up. And what were they doing? They were doing their duty, their job, at great risk to themselves. Why do we call that heroic? It was, they were not worried about their own self-interest, but doing what they ought to do. And that's amazing, right? I mean, it's worth thinking about. Would you have the courage to do it? And if you had the courage, would you have the fortitude to do it? Would you have a sufficient sense of justice to do it? Like right then and there. Like there's no time to think, right? Like you find out what you're made of under pressure. And these men and women who did their duty, we remember them, right? We set up monuments to them because they show us what a good human being is. And that's what James Wilson is saying. So our natural liberty is not the freedom to do anything, right? When the founders say you have a right of natural liberty, it doesn't mean you're free to do anything, right? They say the laws of nature are the measure and the rule. They ascertain the limits and extent of natural liberty. What are the laws of nature? Well, if you read a little bit more, you'd say the laws of nature are simply the laws of reason. So 2 examples from James Wilson, which you didn't have in your reading, I think, but it's in the same chapter. 2 examples of the laws of nature are keep your promises If you say you're going to do something, do it. Uphold your contracts. But just keep your promises. These firefighters made a promise to serve the public, to try to rescue those in danger. And they kept it. Right? Another law of nature that Wilson talks about is don't harm innocent people. Right? So your natural right to liberty is to exercise dominion over your own life and your actions within the bounds of the laws of nature, within the bounds of what's reasonable. All natural rights have natural limits. This is something we've forgotten about natural rights. There's a popular saying that rights are trumps. I know, do you play cards? Do young people play cards still? Yeah. And you know what a trump is? Like when you're sued? And the idea that, let me use an example. Like sometimes we think the right of free speech means we can say anything we want. But what Wilson would say is, no, the right of free speech, the natural right of free speech, is to say anything within the bounds of the law of nature. So can you libel someone? What's libel? Anyone?
Maligning their reputation.
Yeah, saying something, and it's not only maligning their reputation, it's what?
Willfully, inaccurately.
Inaccurately or falsely. Saying false things about someone to harm their reputation is libel. So if you went home tonight and said, that lecture was terrible, that would be libelous. Right? So is your right to free speech a right to libel someone? To say dishonest things about them? No. That would be unreasonable. It would be wrong, right? That's what Wilson means, that all natural rights are bounded by the natural law. Okay. Another example. Imagine there is no, I was thinking about this in the drive over. Imagine that there are no RAs. In fact, there's no rules, right, on campus. That's a state of nature, when there are no rules, right? And you're in your dorm room, and it's a Tuesday night, and your next door neighbors are being loud. At what point is it reasonable to go knock on their door and say, you really need to be quiet? Anyone?
1 in the morning.
1 in the morning? Yes? No? What do you think? How many would say that's a good time? How many would say earlier? Oh, good, good. That's really late. Okay. So what, 11 o'clock or something? How many would say 9 o'clock? Yeah, this is what you're getting into, Reagan. Yeah, okay. So at some point, though, everyone agrees. Does everyone agree at some point, imagine, no RAs, no rules, at some point, it's not reasonable for you to be making a noise that disturbs your neighbors, even if you're in your own room. Everyone agree to that? Or maybe to reframe it, it's unreasonable for your neighbor to be playing loud music beyond the time. Everyone agree to that? Do you need to have a written rule to know that? Everyone agrees. We might disagree whether it's 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. With me? That's what James Wilson means. So to translate what he's saying, your dignity and perfection lies in turning down the music when you know you should before the RA tells you to be quiet, out of consideration for your neighbor. Right? That's the moral framework. Shri? Shri's question is, if you say something that's false, ontologically false, would that be considered not protected by free speech? Well, here's the thing. Maybe. It depends. It would be libelous. Well, it have to be about someone. You'd have to know it. So why, I'm going to jump ahead real quickly. Why do we need RAs at all? Like, you all agree there's some time to be quiet. Why can't we just rely on your good behavior and not have RAs? What do RAs get paid? I don't know. I assume they get free room and board. Do they get paid too? Yes, no, what? Tell me. What's the budget for RAs at Notre Dame? It's got to be like $1 million, right? For all the RAs or something like that? So who's paying for that? The parents watching this. So you parents are paying for people to tell your kids to be quiet. Why do we do that? Why don't we just rely on your own virtue? You all should be able to answer this question, yeah.
You can't expect people to always follow the rules.
You can expect Notre Dame students to always be, well, there are no rules, always be reasonable. Or what if there's a dispute? Is it 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock when quiet hours should start? Hard to know. What do you need to know to actually not have conflict? So all the conflict, like between neighbors, or you'll know this when you get out of school. Or how many of you live off campus? Yeah. What time are you quiet off campus? I assume all the best parties are off campus, right? Because there are no RAs, right? Or who are the RAs for off campus? The police, right? So with no police, there'd be a dispute because you young people would think, we don't need to be quiet till 2. And the neighbors would say, no, you need to be quiet at midnight or 11 or whatever it is. And then you'd fight and you'd argue. Now, the argument is not one of principle. Everyone agrees at some point you should be quiet. The argument is at what time? And what happens when there's no clear rules? What time you're supposed to be quiet? That's when you get conflict, right? If there are clear rules, then everyone knows you have to be quiet at this time. And there's an authority. I just explained why we need government. We're born free, born equally free. We're supposed to govern ourselves according to the law of nature. But we don't always do so, because we don't always respect our neighbors and their rights. Moreover, sometimes the laws of nature are not clear. And what do we need when they're not clear? We need a common authority. That common authority is what? It's called government. That was easy. I just explained all of the founders' political philosophy using RAs. Everyone with me on natural equality, natural freedom, laws of nature, the bounded nature of rights? Questions about that? Do you see how all of this follows from our created nature? That's the founders' thinking right there. Yeah, please. Tell me your name too. Josh.
Sorry, it's Josh. I'm curious to know if they would think that any of these sort of rights or ideas about goodness and badness come from divine proclamation, or if some of them come from like sort of civil society and.
Oh, yeah, good. No, that's a perfect question. So Josh asked, how do we know about these laws of nature, basically, right? Okay, let me go forward here. Anyone know who this is? Anyone? Yeah. It's not Thomas Paine. That's a good joke. Good choice, though. What? It's Alexander Hamilton. And Hamilton, this is in 1775. He's your age when he's writing this. So this is Hamilton and the Farmer Refuted. Actually, I have no idea if it's Hamilton because I didn't make the slide. So I hope it's the quote's from Hamilton, at least. Okay. So in 1775, there's a guy he writes under the pen name The Farmer. The Farmer is a loyalist. And he says, you insurrectionists, he's talking about the founders, you insurrectionists, in all your talk about natural rights, you sound like Thomas Hobbes. And everyone knows Hobbes didn't believe in morality. He believed all law was conventional. That is, there's no moral natural law. How many of you had the C.S. Lewis class last year? Did you read Mere Christianity in that class? I assume you did, right? In the first 5 chapters or books of Mere Christianity, they're very short, he talks about the law of right and wrong, I think is how he phrased it. Is that what he says? That's what C.S. Lewis is talking, everything we're talking about, the law of nature, that's what C.S. Lewis calls the law of right and wrong. That's what we're talking about. And the question is, how do we know this? And Hamilton answers, tell me your name again, sorry. Josh's question right here, right? Right. And I'm going to go forward to the next quote. Right. We have, the law of nature is the law of reason, and we have the faculty of reason. Doesn't mean we're going to get all the particulars right, but if I said, keep your promises, honor your contracts. Does anyone think you don't have to, it's right to break your promises? Or like to agree to do something and then not do it? I mean, maybe there are circumstances which excuse it. But is it right to intentionally deceive someone? Is it right to harm an innocent person just for fun? How do you know that? That's the question being asked. How do you know that? Now, some people don't know that. Some people don't know it's wrong to harm an innocent child. And what do we call them? What do we call them? Psychopaths. And that can be from an accident, right? An accident of nature. But it's reasonable to expect people to know right from wrong. In Hamilton and James Wilson says, we're born with a moral sense. Hamilton here says, we have our rational faculties. We can discern right from wrong. Right? What's amazing when you're a parent, I assume no one has kids here, or a few people have kids, I know, but none of the undergraduates have kids. What's gonna happen is especially your firstborn, you're gonna buy lots of things. You can buy lots of presents. And what's the kid gonna play with when you give them a present? Like at Christmas, they'll unwrap it. What do they play with? They play with the box. And then they ignore the present. And when does your 3-year-old want to play with the toy you gave them? There's one time and one time only when they want to play with that toy, which is when? Yeah, when your friends bring their kids over, you invite your friends over for dinner and they have a 3-year-old, and that 3-year-old grabs your friend's toy, your kid's toy, and what does your kid say? Mine. And I mean, kids are natural Lockeans, right? They know it's theirs. And why does your kid, I mean, maybe you didn't do this when you were little, but why do the kids say, no, it's mine? Are just kids nasty? What's the 3-year-old worried about? The other person breaking it or bringing it home, right? Right? All this seems to be, at least the founders thought, part of human nature. It's part of those capacities, right? That's what it means to be part of a rational being. Okay, let me move on. Any other questions real quick? Okay. Okay, so by nature, we're free and equally free. We have the capacity to do right, to know right from wrong and do right. We also have the capacity to do wrong, right? Some of us are too loud, too late in the night. And in fact, when it gets late in the night, our judgments may be impaired and we don't care about our neighbors. So we do things we shouldn't do. And if we don't have an authority, what's going to happen? I mean, let me take that back. If there were no RAs and no rules in the dorms, what would happen? What would happen in this place? It would be paradise. It would be chaos. How quickly would things devolve? What would be the first dorm to devolve? Yeah, and it would just be chaotic. And then what would happen, do you think? We just play it out. What? People would leave, I guess. Let's say you can't leave. No one would get along. So and there'd probably be thefts and noise. So what? Come on, we're in Mendoza. This is a market opportunity, right? What do the dorms need? Security and law. Who will provide that? I don't want to get in trouble, but what's that?
Off-season athletes.
Well, maybe. I mean, I was thinking like the Italians, right? For a fee, we will protect you. Right? Couldn't you see that happening? Everyone has their own little private security force. Right? I mean, wouldn't your parents pay for that if they didn't think you were safe? Okay, I'm going to stop talking because I do want to come back next week. But all right. So, look, because we are meant to be free, but we don't actually always act well, we need a common authority. Right? I mean, we could all enforce the law of nature against each other, right? And tell each other to be quiet, right? And the first time you might ask politely to your neighbor, and then the second time you might ask more sternly. And what are you going to do the third time? Or to ask this is an example I like in class. Why is the drug trade so violent? I mean, does anyone traffic here? Like, why, I don't know. Molly, what would you deal if you dealt? Let's say it's cocaine, right? Molly. Okay, yeah. And tell me your name. Okay, so Luke, you deliver a bunch of Molly to Luke. Luke doesn't pay you, right? Why doesn't Molly just sue Luke? It's illegal because they're in a state of nature with each other. There's no law. What's your name? Matthew. Okay, so Molly, what are you going to do to Luke to make sure he pays or to make sure Matthew pays?
I'm gonna tell my brother to go beat him up.
So, and you're going to do so in what way? So everyone can see, right? This is what happens when you don't keep your promises with me. Right? That's what would happen, right? That's what happens because there's no common law. Because people don't keep their promises. Right? And if you just paid for your drugs, we wouldn't need government. But we're not. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. Does that sound familiar? Federalist 51. But we're not angels. So we need government. Okay. What's the purpose of government? To protect those natural rights that we're born with, that we're endowed with by our Creator, but are insecure when left to ourselves. Everyone follow? Okay. This is what Hamilton says here. The principal aim of society is to protect individuals in the enjoyment of those absolute rights. Or here's James Madison, I think. I guess you'll have to trust me here. Here it is. Oh, sorry, one more. This being the end of government, that alone is just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. Your natural rights are part of your property. That's what Madison's getting at. Right. He says you can have property in things, but you have property in your rights. And the purpose of government is to protect property, including your life and liberty. Okay, one final question in the last 3 minutes. So we need government. The founders are not anarchists. The founders believe we're social beings by nature. We need each other, and we need a way to live together reasonably. So we need authority, but there is no natural authority, right? All men are created equal. No one is born with authority to govern, because we each have authority over our own lives. So how do naturally equal individuals create authority? And the founder's answer is via consent. Right? Consent follows from equality. And remember, equality is we're equal in our natural liberty. Right? So equality and consent are reciprocal terms. Okay, what does consent mean today, though? Like, I mean, that might have worked in 1776 or 1787. But how do we consent to be part of America today? How do you, for the men in the audience, when did you know you were part of this regime?
I would say selective service.
Selective service. Okay, what's selective service? You sign a piece of paper, and what is on that piece of paper? What does it say? When you sign it, tell me your name? Nicholas. When you sign that piece of paper, what were you signing?
Signing up for the draft, essentially.
My country can call me up and send me to war. And if I don't go to war, where do you go? To jail. Like, that gets your attention, right? Okay, Nicholas, how old were you when you signed that? Do you remember?
18.
About 18. Okay, so were you born in America?
Yes.
Okay, Nicholas where were you born?
California.
Okay, Nicholas is born in California. At 8, like his parents came here. How does Nicholas consent to being part of this social compact? Well, when he's 18, we effectively say to Nicholas, you don't have to stay. You can leave. That's the right to emigrate with an E, to leave. But if you stay, you got to sign up for the draft. And that effectively is Nicholas giving his consent. Right? Okay, give me 2 extra minutes here. Do you remember what the Berlin Wall is? Yes, no? I mean, it's amazing to me. The Berlin Wall fell my freshman year in college. Right? It's ancient history to you. Who built the Berlin Wall?
Soviets, right?
Well, the East Germans, who were the East German government, that was a proxy for the Soviets. Why was the Berlin Wall built? To keep people in. That is, in East Germany, they built a wall to keep people in. They said to Nicholas, you can't leave. Now we say to Nicholas, if you want to stay, you have to sign up for the draft. But we called East Germany a tyranny in part because the regime did not respect the right for people to leave. And therefore, the East German government was not based on consent. And that's a tyranny because it violates our natural rights. Okay. Consent follows from equality, and we're equal in our natural liberty. Our natural liberty comes from our Creator who created us in the way we are. To protect our natural liberty and all of our other natural rights, we need government. The purpose of government is to protect our rights. We can create a government via consent. That's the principles of the Declaration of Independence. Okay, two things. Next week, we're going to have a guest lecturer, Notre Dame alumnus, and I'm going to have Professor Otteson say a few things about that lecture. 2 weeks from now, we turn to Lincoln and Douglas, Stephen Douglas. The Lincoln-Douglas debates, which we're not actually reading the Lincoln-Douglas debates, we're reading speeches that contain, one from Lincoln, one from Douglas, that contain the essential arguments that are present in the Lincoln-Douglas debates. What I want you to pay attention to in the Lincoln-Douglas debates is their meditation on the concepts of equality and consent and rights. Because Lincoln and Douglas debate all the things that we've been talking about for the last hour. Okay, Professor Otteson, can you say a few words about our guest speaker next week?
I'm happy to. When you were talking about who we call for security, I thought you were going to say political science professors, which would have been a great cause of hilarity. I just wanted to say for next week, we're going to have a very distinguished guest, a distinguished historian, Bradley Berzer from Hillsdale College. He's going to talk to us about how Anglo-Saxons and Celts remade the world in 1776. I'll give him a proper introduction next week. But he has written on a wide range of things, including J.R.R. Tolkien. He's got an award-winning book about Tolkien. He wrote a biography of Charles Carroll, who was the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence. And perhaps his greatest claim to fame is he and I were actually roommates as undergraduates. So he will be here next week. Good news is, in addition to that, no additional readings. Just come for the talk that he'll give next week.
He's a magnificent lecturer, and you can ask him and Professor Otteson what it was like in the 1950s here at Notre Dame.
All right, thank you. We'll see you next week.